In 1815, a single man knew the outcome of the Battle of Waterloo before any king, any general, or any government in Europe. He used that information to make a move on the London bond market that would become one of the most debated financial maneuvers in history. That man was Nathan Mayer Rothschild, and what his family built over the next century was not just a fortune. It was a financial architecture that held an entire continent together, and sometimes brought it to its knees. The story does not begin with power, it begins with survival. In the 1740s, a narrow, cramped street in Frankfurt, Germany, housed one of the most oppressed communities in Europe. The Judengasse, the Jews' lane, was a ghetto where Jewish families were locked behind gates at night, forbidden from owning land, banned from most professions, and taxed simply for existing in public. It was here, in a small house marked by a red shield on the door, that Mayer Amschel Bauer was born in 1744. He would later take his name from that shield, Rothschild, meaning red shield in German, a name born from oppression that would one day be synonymous with unimaginable wealth. Mayer lost both parents to smallpox before he was 13. He was sent to study to become a rabbi, but fate redirected him. He became an apprentice at a banking house in Hanover, where he developed a deep fascination with rare coins and financial instruments. He had a gift, not just for numbers, but for relationships. He understood that in a world designed to exclude him, influence was the only currency that truly mattered. He returned to Frankfurt and began trading antique coins with local nobility. His most important client became Wilhelm IX, the Landgrave of Hesse-Kassel, one of the wealthiest princes in Europe. Wilhelm trusted Mayer, and Mayer leveraged that trust into a banking operation that would change history. He was officially appointed court financial agent in 1779, and from that moment the Rothschild machine began to turn. But Mayer thought bigger than any one city or any one client. He had 5 sons, and he deployed them like chess pieces across Europe's financial capitals. Amschel stayed in Frankfurt. Solomon went to Vienna. Nathan, the most brilliant of them all, went to London. Kalman, known as Karl, went to Naples, and Jacob, who became James, went to Paris. 5 cities, 5 banking houses, 1 family, 1 unified strategy. They communicated through a private courier network faster than any government postal system. They used a coded language in their letters. They shared intelligence, capital, and clients across borders at a time when information itself was the most valuable commodity on Earth. While European monarchs were still dispatching messengers on horseback, the Rothschilds were operating what was effectively the 19th century's first information network. Nathan in London became the engine of the entire operation. He arrived in England in 1798, initially trading textiles in Manchester before moving to London and establishing N.M. Rothschild & Sons. His talent for reading markets was extraordinary. He operated with a calm precision that unsettled even seasoned financiers. During the Napoleonic Wars, the British government faced a logistical nightmare. They needed to fund Allied armies fighting across Europe, but moving gold across a war-torn continent was nearly impossible. Nathan solved it. He engineered a complex system of bills of exchange and financial transfers that delivered funds to the Duke of Wellington's armies in Spain without moving a single physical coin across enemy lines. The British government was stunned. Nathan Rothschild had just demonstrated that finance could win wars. And then came Waterloo. On June 18, 1815, Napoleon Bonaparte met the Duke of Wellington in a field in present-day Belgium. The fate of Europe hung on the outcome. Rothschild agents were positioned strategically close to the battlefield. When Napoleon was defeated, a Rothschild courier reached London with the news a full day before the government's own messengers arrived. What Nathan did with that knowledge has been debated by historians for 2 centuries. One popular account claims he spread a false rumor that Napoleon had won, causing British government bonds, known as consols, to collapse in price before quietly buying enormous quantities at the bottom. Whether the full story unfolded exactly that way remains contested among historians. What is not contested is that Nathan's position in the bond market after Waterloo was enormously profitable, and that the Rothschild family's wealth expanded dramatically in the years that followed.
The family did not just profit from war, they financed the infrastructure of peace. In the mid-19th century, they became the primary backers of railway expansion across Europe, understanding before most that railways would transform commerce, agriculture, and military logistics. They financed the construction of mines in Spain, copper operations in South America, and oil fields that would eventually feed the growing industrial hunger of the modern world. When Brazil sought independence financing, when the United States needed funding after the Civil War, when Britain required capital to purchase the Suez Canal, the answer was always the same. The Rothschilds provided it. By the 1820s, the family had become the primary financial advisors and lenders to multiple European governments simultaneously. They held the bonds of Britain, France, Austria, Prussia, and Naples. Kings and prime ministers who once dismissed Jewish financiers as second-class subjects now depended on Rothschild's credit to keep their governments solvent. The family had transformed systemic prejudice into systemic leverage. This power did not come without complexity and cost. The Rothschilds financed governments on all sides of conflicts, which made them indispensable to the machinery of war, while also making them targets of deep suspicion. Anti-Semitic conspiracy theories grew in direct proportion to their success. Critics accused them of manufacturing wars to profit from both sides. Pamphlets, propaganda, and eventually some of the most vile political literature in European history used the Rothschild name as a symbol of shadowy financial control. These conspiracy theories were not only false, they were dangerous. They contributed to a broader culture of anti-Jewish hatred that would reach its most horrific conclusion in the 20th century. The Holocaust devastated Jewish communities across Europe, including members and associates connected to the broader Rothschild world. The family that had been blamed for controlling everything, in fact, lost enormous wealth, property, and lives during the Nazi era. Several of their grand European estates were seized and looted. It remains one of history's most grotesque ironies that the family used as the symbol of Jewish power was also among the many Jewish families targeted by the worst machinery of European hatred.
The 20th century reshaped the Rothschild empires significantly. The two world wars disrupted European finance, demolished old aristocratic banking relationships, and forced radical restructuring. What had once been a unified five-country operation split into increasingly independent branches. The British and French houses became the dominant survivors. N.M. Rothschild in London continued operating as a prestigious private bank and investment advisory firm. The French house, Rothschild & Co., remained a significant player in European finance and mergers. In 2012, for the first time in the family's history, the British and French branches formally merged their holding companies under the leadership of Alexandre de Rothschild, representing a symbolic reunion of a dynasty that Napoleon and two world wars had struggled to fracture. Today, the Rothschild name persists in global finance not as the omnipotent force of conspiratorial imagination, but as a respected, if significantly smaller, player in advisory banking, private wealth management, and investment. Rothschild & Co. operates in over 40 countries and continues to advise on major mergers, acquisitions, and government financing deals. The family remains wealthy. Estimates place their collective fortune in the billions, but they are no longer the singular financial force that once moved European bond markets with a whisper. What Mayer Amschel built from a ghetto in Frankfurt was genuinely remarkable. A man who was forbidden to own land died as the lender to kings. His sons turned regional banking into a continental network. They demonstrated that information, relationships, and trust, deployed intelligently across borders, could construct a kind of power that armies could not match. The Rothschild story is not a fairy tale of secret control. It is something more complicated and more human. It is the story of a family that faced extraordinary discrimination and built extraordinary resilience. It is also the story of how that success made them a lightning rod for the darkest impulses of the societies around them. History rarely delivers simple heroes or clean villains. The Rothschilds were brilliant financiers who profited enormously from systems of war and debt that caused suffering for millions. They were also a Jewish family that rose from a locked ghetto to the heights of European power and were never fully forgiven for it. That tension between what they built and what they were blamed for is perhaps the most enduring part of their legacy.